It's not a new industry here by any means. So like to find those little jewel pockets where there's not anything still, like you're like, holy shit, I gotta jump on that. But those sort of like center states were like right smack dab in the middle that people tend to forget about, those flyover states. I think there's going to be a lot of huge opportunity there in the future. If I put on my tinfoil hat here for a second, as people get sick of, high taxes, high crime, high this, that, and everything on the coast, they start moving inward. There's gonna be a lot of opportunities that open up in the Montanas, the Oklahomas, the Wyomings, where they've been largely forgotten, especially with remote work these days. If you can just pick up and go somewhere. I don't know, I've been saying that for a couple of years now, and I seem to be on the right track. So.
Welcome to the Coffee Experts Club, where we discuss all of the insights, expertise, and drama that goes into making your passion your profession. Our hosts, Aaron, Ben, and Drew, are three coffee experts who have taken their coffee experience and turned it into true expertise. They have consulted with major coffee brands throughout the United States and beyond, providing operations expertise and growth strategy for drive-through openings, multiple locations, and everything in between. So brew yourself a cup and hang out a bit with the Coffee Experts Club.
Hello, everybody in the coffee world. Welcome to Coffee Experts Club.
It's been a good beginning of the year so far, I think.
Yeah, you're in Belize right now?
Belize, I'm on Belize time. That's why I was late to that last meeting. They actually ran the store here solo-ish for last month. Of course, me like this all the time, but not hands-on. And I was pleasantly surprised at the systems that they organically found for some of the processes that I wouldn't have been as efficient as because I'm not a local. So they've been solo and they've been kicking butt.
I think the last time we talked about De Los Mas, they were looking at or contemplating a store manager. Have they settled on a store manager or any sort of management hierarchy like that yet?
Yeah, we've been talking about just the standard. I think what we do in my personal experience, we'll have a manager, an assistant, and then a shift lead, and duties broken down accordingly. Of course, manager is in charge of general accountability. Assistant is going to be more inventory and, accountability when the manager's not there. And then the store lead we actually have the shift lead doing more tally management. So that was something I sucked at as a manager, was keeping my tallies on point. Ben can attest to that. I remember the text I got finally, you're doing something wrong. You better fix this. So yeah, we've been talking to one of the kids down there, and that was this month while I was gone, was kind of a trial period to see how everything was shaken down, how the relationships went. And we didn't put any titles on anything because I think titles, they're a double-edged sword, So now that I'm back, I think we can kind of nurture the relationship. And everybody that I signed the test to did an excellent job. So not disappointed in anybody.
I know in our past, as managers, we would do like all the dry goods ordering and stuff. Is that kind of difficult because they're on such a weird lead time with getting stuff from the US? Does that sort of have to sit with like owner operator?
Yeah, it's been complicated. So we have vendors. We have, I think, 3 vendors in Guatemala that we've been speaking with, because there's just not a lot here in this country for exactly what we do as far as, suppliers go. So, and even in Guatemala, they don't provide exactly the same type of goods that we want. So it has been living with the owner operator and kind of overseeing and managing, and the timeline's weird. It's anywhere between 3 and 5 weeks before we can, 3 is kicking butt with, got it on a jet boat here. So 5 weeks is pretty standard. So we gave them systems for weekly ordering, which is what we're used to, and then had to revamp everything, because it's like, you need to be able to see 5 weeks into the future.
Yeah.
To make sure we're everything. Regardless, we ran out of tons of stuff. So we're Frankensteining it together.
5 weeks would be, even with those ordering systems, 5 weeks is that's tough, especially when you don't know if the season's going to change or there's an influx of a cruise ship stopping in. That's tough. I can see how that would be difficult.
Yeah. And there's not a lot of infrastructure as far as what do you call a newsletter going out for, hey, this month you should be expecting this many tourists through this part of the country. And so I think that's something that we might have to put together. I have historical data, of course, bar graphs that show me and represent how much traffic has come through here in the past. But with COVID, it's not really an accurate representation of what's going to happen because everywhere shut down.
Yeah.
So this month that I'm here for another at least 30 days. We're going to head over to Guatemala and actually meet the people that we're working with. Because up until now, it's just been emails and texts and WhatsApp. WhatsApp's huge outside the US. So we're going to go meet them. And I've heard, the way that people do business here, they love face-to-face interaction. So I'm hoping that shaking hands and having those real conversations and meeting the people behind the texts can change some of those timelines.
Been brushing up on your Spanish?
Un poquito.
All of this is, man, what's just right over the hill is, just setting up your own distribution warehouse or multiple locations.
Interestingly enough, I'm going to share all the secrets because I suppose that's what Coffee Experts Club is. If you import anything, so when we're importing stuff, say from Guatemala or from Mexico or from the US, you pay 30% on top of what you're paying for the goods. So everything costs 30%, and it's a lot. If you become a distributor, you get a 30% discount from the company. So it just eats away the fees you pay for importing. So if we could find local people who want to purchase our goods, maybe I'll open an LLC and purchase for myself and become a distributor for myself. Then maybe you can actually, there are ways around it. And it's just that this industry doesn't exist down here. So we could, there's a potential for De Los Mayas to create some of the strong chains and relationships that I think could benefit a lot of people over here.
Yeah. I can't imagine it would be so, and I don't know, at what point, at how many shops in do you start considering that? I would say maybe 4 or 5, getting your own, like Roasters had with Resilient, that warehouse to be able to, because then your shops could order on a weekly basis because that warehouse is, purchasing 6 months worth of goods at a time.
Yeah, that would be smart, I think. And it's way in the future, but of course, 4 or 5 stores isn't far-fetched for De Los Mayas. I think that the customer base is here and people actually really enjoy the product, and it's kind of unheard of exactly what they're doing. So we've talked a little bit about warehousing and what that looks like, and there's so many unseen. So we're just going to keep taking the punches until our face is tough enough to understand where the punches are coming from next.
So let's talk about Coffee Republic and Marty. He seemed like a funny guy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. It's the whole
super down to earth.
Yeah, great family, really, really good, humble people, strong roots from where they're from, which they uprooted, of course, whole family from California to Montana. But yeah, he has an interesting story going from, what he was doing. Of course, he explained a little bit of his background to becoming a slightly owner operator of the stores with his family to now he's, of course, escalated to the point of most people like to become investors and property managers. So,
yep.
Yeah, he's a very intelligent guy.
One of the things that you guys were talking about that really stood out to me that was funny was when he was talking about how you can frugal yourself to death. I think you guys were talking about the shop and how everything was great in it and they set everything up so well for success. And he's like, yeah, well, you can underspend yourself in tail too. I thought that was so fitting for all the things that we've looked at in the past of just, you got to pinch every single penny and you can't spend. You have to always find the cheapest way to do everything. It was funny to hear somebody go, no, actually you can do that to your detriment. Yeah, you can overspend to your detriment, but you can also underspend to your detriment. And, there's a hole in the floor of one of your shops that's been there for way too long.
Yeah.
You just don't ever hear that from an investor or a business owner. Usually it's the opposite of what he's saying. So it was really cool to hear.
Yeah, it's a higher, 10,000 foot business level, looking down and can see your mistakes of your past or predecessors. And I think, of course, Coffee Experts Club with Collab team, we have a lot of that ability from all the businesses that we've worked with. So we've learned a lot and had some personal experiences. As you mentioned, the whole one in Florida is a real life story. So the foresight is incredible, but to be able to use your hindsight for your foresight is kind of an unheard of thing, as you said, especially in this industry, because we're all dreamers, we're dreamers. We want to get our coffee shop open. Most of all, we want to serve people and create a really nice following. And it's almost with that comes a fear of, okay, well, I need to make sure that we can keep serving people. And I don't want to spend, $5,000 to get my floor fixed, because what if I don't have that $5,000 to pay my employees the next payroll? But it's the infrastructure that, what if your employee falls through the floor? You have to pay all those medical bills. So
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah,
I think he was really smart about that, talking about like how even before they opened, like he had set aside the buckets for money for every single project that goes into it. Which I mean, like you said, that's you can only get to that point with like the amount of hindsight that I'm sure that they have. But just to be smart enough to carry that through and go, okay, this is the construction bucket, this is the marketing bucket, this is the employee payroll bucket. I think it came across as like good wisdom too. Like you could tell he's been through it. They know what they're doing. The wisdom of like, I'm gonna set all this money aside ahead of time and it's gonna be proportioned out exactly to what it needs to go to, and then still have like an emergency fund. Like, man, these you could tell that they were prepared for this, like, in every way they could be, especially with how you're saying, like, the grand opening went so smoothly. That just sounds like good preparation.
hmm yeah, and then it was not just of course, not in just the building, the construction. It was in the hiring, the process, the training process, the marketing, the public relations. It was an excellent execution. And I mean, it's like with anything that if you're rebuilding, say, no, I'm not a mechanic, but if you're rebuilding a car, you don't want to reuse your old washers because you're going to end up spending more money replacing that eventually. You want to be able to rebuild the engine, turn the car on, and have it roll smoothly for the next 100,000 miles. You don't want to have to replace it every 10,000 miles. So the same in business. It is hard up front and can be a headache and you have your sleepless nights, but I'd rather have my sleepless nights before there are customers than when I open my doors and the customers are sitting right there.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, rather do it early, and then instead of like running out of product at a certain point while there's customers waiting because you're like, oh shoot, I didn't account for that. Then I didn't think of that. I wonder, have you heard any rumblings? Are they thinking second location already? Are they still sort of waiting to see how this goes?
Yeah, I mean, he mentioned in the call that they'd been eyeing a location, and I think it's all about timing now. So what store one can carry and into store two, and they know as well as we do that when you multiply your locations, you multiply your customer base, and things kind of expand exponentially. They grow faster. Word gets out. It's the organic marketing that happens when you get them to. So they were, I think, even before store number one, eyeballing number two because
Mm,
it's you want to create a foundation that it can stand on itself and run itself. You don't want to have to keep investing or maybe investing and not really knowing. And when you get a couple locations, like it's hard to balance on one foot. Then you get 2 feet, it's a little bit stronger, 3 feet and 4 feet, and so on. It gets stronger with every store. But yeah, they actually there's a beautiful location that they have their hands on. I think it's just about timing.
makes sense. I mean, yeah, nothing sucks more than opening a store in January or the
Yeah.
winter months period. Although the winter months, he was talking about it's like it snows and then leaves. Like, are there winter months similar? Would you say to like Tri Cities, or is it much more
Um,
snowy there?
I wasn't there for the winter, and I don't think I'll ever be there for the winter,
Yeah.
but I still watch the weather over in Great Falls, and yeah, it's just so cold. Like, I remember Jonathan's brother was telling me a story. He's like, "It's weird when it's so cold that you go, say, to, like, a fast food place and you order a soda, and when you grab the soda, it's warmer than your hands, even though it's iced because it's so cold outside." So they don't have a lot of snow. That's not really the problem. It's just the extended cold weather. It's just I can't. I have nothing to compare it to. I've never experienced it. But
Yeah.
talking to the baristas, some of the baristas there who had some prior coffee experience, they're just used to it in the winter. They have the winter every year, and they're used to what comes. And it doesn't really slow the traffic down because probably of the snow. Picking up and leaving as soon as it hits the ground doesn't. They don't have to send out plows. There's not a lot of snow days. Yeah, they keep functioning as almost as normal. They're tougher than I am.
I noticed he said that like this January for them has like obviously has its slowdowns, but not nearly as much as they would see like in California, which is funny because it's always warm in California. But if it drops 10 degrees in California, is it that much more noticeable?
Yeah, that's sweater weather down there.
It's interesting though. I mean, it's a cool company. I hope they do well. I mean, I know they'll do well. Of course, they've got, so many years of experience and us, of course, right? But
Yeah.
I mean, doing well because we talked about it, I don't know how many times we talked about how, having one location's great. Like if you want the same pay as maybe the job you quit to start this new company, and if you want to work in the stand all the time, but really where it starts to pay off is that third and fourth location. So I hope that works out for them. Do you think that there's room in where they're at for like a 3, 4, 5 locations?
Yeah, I think that they're not gonna have any problem with gaining their momentum that they want. I think, as they're so prepared, and their foresight is reinforced by all the things that they've learned. So um there's definitely room, and I don't that that town doesn't have like a hometown, Great Falls grown coffee shop like that. They have some that are similar. They're all, I don't want to talk down on any of them. They're all great in their own ways, but they're all very different. And I think the ambitions that Coffee Republic carries are a little bit different, and the values that they bring into the business, they're very employee centric. They want people to succeed, and they want to invest in their people, and they want them to grow. And I think that, of course, that's the key, I think, to having a thriving business. And those happy employees are the ones you retain. The retained employees are the ones that retain customers. So it's kind of compounds, but there's definitely room. There's definitely room for, 3 or 4, or maybe even 5. Me, I'm ambitious. So
Room for them to become basically the hometown hero brand.
exactly, come in and caffeinate Great Falls.
Yeah, if you had that opportunity, there's not a lot of spaces left to be that as a new company. Like, there's not a lot of towns left that don't have that hometown hero brand. So the opportunity to come in and be that, like Roasters was for Tri-Cities, that's huge, because then you've got raving customers or raving fans just simply because you rep the city. Like, it's so great to become that hometown hero. And most of the larger metropolitan areas around the country that's already taken. So if they could come in and posture as like, we are the coffee of Great Falls, man, talk about a rocket ship. That'd be crazy.
Yeah, and it's funny to think of, any industry is competitive, and we all like to do it our way. It's not competitive if you're just doing it your way, I suppose, but still, you're serving coffee. You're serving iced, hot blended coffee, and if there's already somebody there, it's competition. And we have clients that come out of Southern Oregon, and there's already hometown brands, and yet they still opened up. So if you have that competitive spirit, you have that fighting nature, and you have that unique idea, you can find the niche market in any town. I just think it's all about connecting with the community. And so, if you like to fight and push, and you believe in your dream, it's possible. But with their specific situation, there isn't, like you said, there's not a lot of room left, at least where we're from. I know I've moved around the States a lot, and there are some places like East Coast is gaining momentum on this industry as well, but West Coast up and down there's a coffee shop on every corner.
Yeah, it really is. We've been doing coffee on the West Coast. Pretty similar to this since what, the 80s? Like, it's not an old industry, but it's not a new industry here by any means. So like, to find those little jewel pockets where there's not anything still, like, you're like, holy shit, I gotta jump on that. And it makes sense, East Coast, that it's getting so big there, because it's gonna get across the country at some point. But like, I feel like, is Great Falls considered Midwest? I don't know. But those sort of like center states, were like right smack dab in the middle, that people tend to forget about, those flyover states. I think there's going to be a lot of huge opportunity there in the future. If I put on my tinfoil hat here for a second, I think those middle states, as people get sick of, high taxes, high crime, high this, that, and everything on the coast, they start moving inward. There's going to be a lot of opportunities that open up in the Montanas, the Oklahomas, the Wyomings, where they've been largely forgotten, especially with remote work these days. If you can just pick up and go somewhere. I don't know. I've been saying that for a couple of years now, and I seem to be on the right track. So you heard it here first, guys. Wyoming's the next big state for coffee.
Yeah, well, and I think it's surprising, the people who grew up in the big cities on the West Coast, the cost of living is different. You don't know anything but your little world when you grow up in your little world. So, and you don't really live anywhere else. So I think it is fully possible, the people who do want to come. It is an open market, and it's always going to be an open market. It's just a competitive market. But people who want to pick up their life and move inward, there's a lot of opportunity. And if you need a reference, the Collab team's here to help you out with locations and contacts. So I know we do have, like in Utah, there's a client that's been looking at locations, and it's the same. They don't have a hometown brand exactly in that city where they're at. So there is opportunity. You just got to search for it.
Well, even Human Being, in Reno, I think Nevada and Arizona seem to be two spots, obviously, because they're like, They're snowbird states that everybody runs to in the winter from up here, but they seem to be growing a lot too. I hear a lot of new shops opening up in Arizona, all around Arizona. I mean, BlackRock is blowing up down there. Who was I just looking at those down in Arizona too? Dang, I wish I could remember. But these states that like are sort of typically not underserved, but just not as saturated as Washington, Oregon, and California, and even Idaho. Like if it at some point, if you're opening a coffee shop or if you're running a coffee shop, it's smart to look at those underserved markets. Like, yeah, compete in your area, sure. I mean, there's always room for more coffee where you're at. There's especially if you're in a growing community that's adding more people. There's more people to bring to your coffee shop, and those are great to have. But the underserved markets are where you can take, a little drive-through stand and open it up and be doing $3,000 days, a couple weeks later. So it'll be curious to see how that goes in the future. Where the next big place to do coffee is. Maybe it's Montana. I don't know.
Maybe it's Montana.
Belize.
Well, my experience here in Belize has taught me that there is always going to be a market for this stuff. Because, I mean, of course, there wasn't any coffee shops here, so it was almost like it's a new business and people get excited about new businesses, but it's also just a very unique market that you wouldn't necessarily expect for there to be an abundance of customers. So I was actually in Arizona back in September last year, and I was talking to some of the locals, and they say the same thing. We don't have any home till we have a Starbucks, and Starbucks is great, in its lane, but it's not in the lane of what we're talking about. Coffee Republic is in its own lane. It's an indie, it's independent and strong-willed and has, new fresh ideas, and it's a young company, and young companies definitely have a leg up in this specific industry because people get excited. People want something to relate to, and that's what the independent coffee shops give them. So when you move in and, of course, take that chance and take that risk, which entrepreneurs are risky. So I think that most of the regrets entrepreneurs have are not taking that one business risk that they had the idea of, 20 years ago. So, taking that risk and moving with, your style into these places, you can't necessarily lose if you do your style. Now, if you're just trying to copy a Starbucks, we all steal a little bit from the ones who really succeeded, but we don't steal in such a way that people feel that it's imitation. The real art and creativity comes when you do something that you connect with, and then people connect with that because it's innate. And so, as you move into these new places, people get excited about it because they're like, oh my gosh, I feel what they're representing. And that, I think, is where you gain some steam, especially in these little places that don't have, the Sedonas of Arizona that don't have a hometown coffee shop. They have a lot of juice bars, but no coffee republics.
So given all of that, here's a philosophical question for you. Given all of that, and then also given, the knowledge that we have, our history in coffee, would you say that now, say you're Coffee Republic and they've got 3 locations under their belt, would you encourage them to move to a franchise model to boost the speed of their growth, or would you encourage them to stay in a sort of enclosed, self-owned company versus going to that extreme growth model?
So I think it depends. It all depends. But what I would personally encourage, I love the idea of the franchise model, and I'm generally going to advocate for franchising, not just for exponential growth, but for providing opportunity for people who are hungry to help grow a brand. And if you do the franchise model properly, which it seems today that what was written 20 years ago or 10, 15 years ago doesn't naturally support the franchisees the way that the franchisees expected. If you are able to write a franchise model that supports these, young, hungry entrepreneurs, because that's what they are, then it's not going to bite you. And it's going to grow your brand and create loyalty and become part of your story. So Coffee Republic specifically, I think that they're poised for a beautiful opportunity to franchise. If they find the proper franchisees, they're such likable people. I don't think they'd have a problem finding good quality folks who want to invest in their business and help it grow. If you set it up right and, maintain those values that you started with, I think that the business can grow exponentially on its own just through the natural marketing, through the entrepreneurial world, because there is an entrepreneurial world. It's through networking and marketing that we all, there's always chatter about what's going on. And a franchise built upon the model of supporting franchisees and giving them what they need and really making sure that the road is paved, that they're going to set these people down. I would definitely advocate for franchising, just, for growing your business, sure, and expanding your pocketbook, but mostly for creating and providing opportunity for people who've been definitely searching for it and looking for it in all these different ways.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah, I thought about that. I think while I was watching that replay back with Marty, because they came out of a franchise, they have so much experience and they were so well prepared for this opening. And I'm sure that, they dialed out that shop, as best they could, because it was a remodel, right, from a previous business.
Mhm.
But they just seem to know how to create that easily replicable, location, shop, and process so that, if they wanted to jump in a franchise, it seems like they could really do it whenever they wanted. So I was curious to get your input about that. But yeah, I mean,
It's
I agree. It's a good model, especially for growth and for giving opportunity. The only, I think, holdback I ever had was, your culture, what if you
Mhm.
live in culture. But like you said, like if you change how the franchise model works, because typically it's always just like we'll franchise so we can get, 25% of your income or your
Mhm.
revenue, and you grow our business for us. But if you swap that more to like hey, this is a franchise because we want you to be a part of our company, we want you to grow, I think you could retain a lot of your culture that way.
And I mean, I've spoken on it time and time again. This is the next generation of the coffee world coming up right now. People who've come out of franchises who,
Mm.
maybe have certain opinions about how those franchises were ran and want to do it proper and really want to be part of something, but don't necessarily know how to start their own thing. So I think the franchise model of the next generation of coffee shops can be something which, really brings us all together rather than creates more bloody waters in the ocean of coffee.
Yep. Yep. Well, Mr. Moody, it's been fun. Been a grand Tuesday.
Yes, sir. It's been awesome.
We will talk to everybody on the next Coffee Experts.
Later, guys.
See ya.
Thanks so much for joining us today. For those of you who are looking to become a coffee expert yourself, we offer an incredible, thorough training online for opening your first coffee drive-thru at www.myfirstdrivethru.coffee.